I made over $23,000 in revenue thanks to my OnlyFans agency in May 2025. And if you ever make one of these 5 mistakes, then you'll never succeed in making a living from your OnlyFans agency. So listen carefully to this video until the end. Okay, so the first mistake, I've already talked about it quite a few times on my YouTube channel, is wanting to spread yourself too thin. So you need to understand that in any online business, and especially in FM, it's important to know how to diversify, but not to spread yourself too thin. And that distinction is really important. Diversifying simply means having a system that works, and then, for example, wanting to duplicate it or looking to have another source of income on the side. And that's the right way to do it. Now, spreading yourself too thin is when you have a system that doesn't really work well, that hasn't truly proven itself, and you want to duplicate it or create a new source of income when the first one isn't well established. Why do I think this is a mistake? Because simply in OFM, very often when you're starting out, okay, you'll have one model. Then, for example, you might have the opportunity to get another one. Of course, this can be a great advantage simply so you're not relying on just one model. If one of them doesn't work out, at least you have another. Now, that's only if you're really well trained, well supported, and especially if you have the time. Because very often, I know quite a few managers who are just starting out, and some of them even have 1, 2, 3, or 4 models. Sometimes they might be Latinas because they are really easy to recruit, but actually, that's a huge problem. Because when you don't have a model who's already making a decent amount of money, when I say that, I mean a model who's already bringing in maybe 10 or 15,000 in net revenue on OnlyFans per month, well, it's actually going to be a problem to launch another one. Why? Because precisely, you're just going to add twice as many problems, twice as many questions, twice as many difficulties, twice as much work. And if you don't have partners who are just as well trained, then you're basically heading straight for disaster. So for me, it's extremely important to focus first on just one model, okay? Obviously, if she works hard, if she's diligent, because if she's not, then it's better to stop and look for another one. But really, it's better to focus on just one model rather than having 2 and doing things halfway. Because also, when you have just one model, there's another mistake you can make. Basically, getting distracted again. Even once you have a model, you can still get distracted, even if you only have one. Why? If, for example, tomorrow I start OFM, I launch Instagram, TikTok, I don't know, ads, threads, Twitter, Reddit, well, that's really spreading yourself too thin. And that's the mistake that a lot of managers make. For example, recently I had a student who told me, well, with this model, here's what I plan to do, Instagram, TikTok, and then threads, Twitter. Well, for me, that's a mistake, okay? Because for me, it's impossible to be good at 4 things at once. And even me, today, at my level, I consider that I'm not very good at all 4 of those areas. For example, the main sources of traffic acquisition. Personally, well, I specialize in Instagram, and actually for years now, I've been on Instagram accounts every single day. That's not the case with Threads, it's not the case with Twitter, and it's not the case, for example, with TikTok. Of course, I do have a good grasp of those platforms because there are associates who use them quite a lot. I've also used them myself at one point, and I got some results too. But in any case, I've never had as many results as I have with Instagram. And that's why, for me, it's super important really to focus on a single source of traffic acquisition with a single model. Obviously, once again, if the model is hardworking and you have enough to work with, enough to test, that's how you're really going to become skilled in one area. And then, well, the model will start making money. And after that, okay, it'll be interesting either to launch the model on another traffic acquisition source like Threads, TikTok, whatever, Twitter, or else just go ahead and take on another model, right? It's really not crazy, for example, to have one model who's only running on Instagram and then to recruit a second model, obviously, to launch her on Instagram as well, because you've mastered Instagram. On the other hand, it's crazy if you have one model and you launch her everywhere, right? And it's even more insane if you have 2 models and you launch them on every platform. For me, the key is really focus, and that's really what allowed me to get to where I am today. It's really about focusing. Okay, I have one model or maybe 2, but that's also because I have partners. So obviously, in that case, it's easier to manage. If you're alone, I don't recommend having 2 models, once again, unless one of them isn't working. But in any case, you really need to have, how should I put it, at least one model who is working. That's really the foundation. And if, for example, there are 2 or 3 of us partners, we can allow ourselves to have perhaps a second, perhaps a third. But if you're just starting out, don't go and take on 2 or 3. Really focus on one model and make her blow up. And when I say blow up, I don't mean reaching 30 or 40,000 in net revenue per month, because that's a huge milestone that's still very difficult to achieve. But what I mean is at least generating 10,000 net with a single model. Once you get to that point, it means you've mastered the model, you've mastered the platform. Now, why not duplicate, either by adding another model or by using another platform? The second mistake is trying to delegate too quickly when you're not yet at the stage where you should be delegating. You should know that I have students in my coaching program who asked me if I knew of a mass DM service. So I told them clearly that I didn't. Why? Because I don't recommend doing things that way. Why? Because it's simply spending money on a system that, in my opinion, is just a trend and will burn out very, very quickly. On my own Instagram accounts, I've already received dozens and dozens of these messages, And for me, it's not really a sustainable method in the long run, especially since it's just a passing trend. So be careful to really determine whether the provider is just trying to line their own pockets or genuinely trying to help us actually make money. That's already something to take into account. But then I told them I don't recommend it to you because for me, organic growth is what allows me to make over 5 figures a month right now, okay? And so for me, that's already incredibly powerful, knowing that we don't have to invest anything, just be smart, create good content, and then, well, we're immediately profitable because we have very, very few expenses in the end. And so after that, I told them that I didn't have any, and then I asked them, why do you need to spend money if you're not already making money organically? They told me because we're struggling. And why are you struggling? Well, first, they explained to me that they had VAs to pay, chatters to pay. So actually, they told me, okay, we have to generate revenue because we have people to pay. But the thing is, that's a huge problem. In OFM, you're not supposed to have a lot of people when you're just starting out and then be forced to make revenue just to pay them. What you need first is to generate revenue when you're on your own, right? Without a chatter, without a VA, and then, okay, you can actually start building your team. But that's only once you're making revenue, right? You should know that these students aren't even making 1,500 in revenue per month. They joined the coaching program not long ago, and in fact, they haven't applied everything I told them. So it's normal, they don't have any results. And actually, the thing is, you first have to go through a period where you really have to grind, where you do the chatting, where you handle client acquisition, meaning traffic. And you really need to spend quite a long time on that, okay? For me, it's several weeks or even several months until you're truly able to generate revenue on your own, until you've mastered, okay, a platform. Once you've mastered Instagram, once you've brought in enough traffic to make, for example, 10K with a model, or maybe between 6 and 8K, and once you've really mastered chatting, well, at that point, okay, you've got it under control. You can already delegate the chatting and then why not the traffic as well? But really, do everything in its own time. And the problem with these two people as a result is that they actually started wanting to delegate well before making any revenue. And that is a huge mistake. But to be honest, I don't blame them because it's really trendy right now to want to delegate right away. And of course, it actually looks cool to have a lot of team members, a lot of chatters, a lot of VAs. For us, just so you know, today we make 5 figures a month and we have 0 VAs. That's because we actually put them on hold. At one point, we tried to delegate with VAs, but it didn't go very well. We went back to basics. Basically, we just took back control of the traffic. Of course, we still have chatters. We have a chatter manager. And actually, you don't even need VAs when you're on your own. Even with 1, 2, or 3 managers, you don't need VAs to make a decent amount of revenue. Now, if you really want to scale to much higher levels, obviously you'll have to go down that road. But actually, you really shouldn't think, I'm just starting out, so I'm going to do what the agencies making huge revenues are doing. Because what those high revenue agencies are doing now is nothing like what they did when they started out. And you really need to take that into account. Just because you copy someone who has the results you want doesn't mean you'll get the same results. In fact, you really have to consider the journey and the evolution and truly do things in the right order. So what's the solution? As I said, stop with the VAs, the chatting. If someone is really good, then sure, why not keep them? Obviously, it doesn't bother them because, in fact, there's very, very little traffic. So in the end, they're not even making any money. But most of the time, if the chatter doesn't have enough traffic, they won't be able to make money and that's going to demotivate them. So for me, you really need to take control of the traffic and even the chatting right from the start when you're just beginning and you're not making at least $6,000 to $8,000 in revenue from a single model in a single month. All right, it's really extremely important to take back control of the traffic because when you delegate the traffic, even the chatting, what you have to understand is that when you delegate it, you have to accept that it will be done less well. You'll never be able to find someone who's better than you because most of the time, if they're really better than you, they're already working in an agency. So actually, you really have to accept that the results will be a bit worse. So if you're already not getting results and you hire, for example, VAs or chatters, you really won't make any money because you're not making any on your own to begin with. So why would you go and delegate? Why would we go and teach someone what we do if we can't even do it ourselves? That's it, quite simply. So it's really extremely important to have results in a field before wanting to delegate it or even teach it to someone else. And this applies to OFM, to training, and to any business. The third really important mistake, given that I'm an expert in organic growth, and that's really what I recommend to everyone. As a result, I interact with a lot of people who, for example, do Instagram Reels, and honestly, way too many people just try to post content and hope to God that one day they'll get good stats and therefore make sales. What you need to understand is that today, organic reach is free, it's really accessible to everyone, just film a video and post it. So you have to realize that there's quite a bit of competition, and to actually generate sales and get good stats on Instagram, you can't just post into the void. You really need to aim to post the best possible content and optimize every detail of your videos. For example, I have students who ask their model to make reels, but at first she would say things like, "Hi, how are you?" and so on. But honestly, nobody cares about that. You need to know that it just doesn't work. The whole idea of short-form content is really to immediately spark the client's curiosity and grab their attention. Attention is truly the key. Today, attention is money, so we really have to optimize this content to make it as high quality as possible. When you have an OnlyFans model, the lighting has to be perfect, the framing has to be good, so either use a ring light for lighting or natural light. For example, in this video, I have a ring light in front of me, and actually the quality is good. And that's extremely important. Just like for the models, their outfits really need to be well thought out. The trend also needs to be interesting. Similarly, I know people who decided not to copy the trends that work, but instead to create their own trends. But when you don't have results, don't try to reinvent the wheel. First, try to copy what works, because if it worked, it's because there are patterns, elements that made that video, for example, successful. So it's better to be a copy of a trend rather than trying to create a trend that will never catch on because we don't know the codes. And what we're doing hasn't been proven in the past. Today, it's no longer enough to just post content randomly and hope that it will catch on. Sure, you can do that, but overall, you'll never get any truly concrete results. So really focus on improving every piece of content you create using your models. And as we'll see in a moment, there's another mistake that's also somewhat related to this one when it comes to models. But in any case, really make sure to optimize your content as much as possible, even if it takes time, because it should take time. It's truly something that's essential. When I work with a model who has no experience, there's a huge difference between her content and that of my models who have maybe 1 or 2 years of experience. And actually, that's normal. She's just starting out. Now, you really have to try to guide them step by step. You have to call them, you have to explain things to them, you have to give them examples, you have to tell them each time, hey, think about this, think about that, do this, do that. Really try to improve. Now, really try to improve every detail of your video so that in the end, you give yourself the best possible chance to optimize your views and get the best possible stats. And so having the best possible stats means getting a lot of traffic. And then if we have traffic and good chatting, we're going to make money. And that's really the recipe. Today, in OFM, to make at least some money and make a living from your online business, it's really about creating good content, so getting attention, and then converting it through chatting. It's really about traffic and then chatting, obviously, once you have the model. Okay, so the fourth mistake you absolutely must not make once you want to start delegating. Now, as I said, this can be a mistake or it might not be. If you already have some stats, if you're already making at least some money, okay, you might think, well, I'll go ahead and delegate the chatting to free up some time and focus on traffic. But actually, the mistake here is not monitoring the chatters closely enough, or if they're VAs, not keeping a close enough eye on those VAs. What you need to understand is that when you delegate to someone, you have to realize that the work will be done less well. And so you already need to spend a lot of time upfront preparing a complete training for that person, but then you also really have to spend a lot of time supporting them from A to Z. That's why for us, when we recruited our chatters during their first shifts, the sales figures were really bad. Honestly, not great at all, nothing like what they are today. For example, yesterday, I'll show you a screenshot. I have chatters, so one of them made a little over almost $400 in net revenue on OnlyFans yesterday in a single shift. And another one made nearly $700. Actually, the reason they're getting results like this is because we're there to support them. We have a chatter manager who does an incredible job. By the way, much respect to him if he sees this, Emmanuel, who really is there every day supporting our chatters. And it's super important to closely monitor people because very often I see managers who want to delegate, well, either the chatting or the traffic or the chatters or the VAs. And then once they've given a bit of training, which might go into detail, but if they don't support them afterwards, they're not going to make any money. Why? Because you really have to guide these people. They don't have the experience that we do. You really have to be there to support them. It's as simple as that. But in any case, you'll see if you're not supportive enough with your chatters or your virtual assistants, they won't make any money. And so it won't be, well, profitable, right? It really won't be worthwhile. So you'll quickly realize this, but it's extremely important. And yes, it's true, it's quite complicated to think that you're delegating a task to save time, but in the end, you won't actually save time at first because you have to spend time with these people so they can really learn this activity, this job. And then after a certain period, when they start to become independent, that's when you'll be able to free up a bit more time. But again, be careful. We always have a manager chatter who is there for the long term and will always be there. We will never do without a manager chatter because obviously, for example, in chatting or even with virtual assistants, they are paid on commission. As a result, there are also a lot of emotions that come into play. If they perform just a little less well one day, fewer stats, fewer sales in chatting, or fewer views on a reel, emotions could come into play and negatively impact their work. So you really need someone rational behind them to always guide them in the right direction. Think of it like this. For example, our chatter is in the back of a truck. If we have a manager, the manager is, for example, the one who drives, so he always keeps the truck going straight. That's good. Let's imagine we're on a road and on the side there's actually a drop-off. In fact, if we don't have a manager for the chatter, it's like sending a truck off with the chatter in the back, and the truck won't necessarily go straight. And especially since, let's say, the road is pretty rocky, well, actually, the truck will go to the right, to the left, then it will tip over, it will fall, it will tumble down the mountain, and that's really what you need to understand. The manager for the chatter is truly the one who will drive this truck and in the end, lead the whole team. Whether it's, for example, a manager for virtual assistants or for chatters, at the beginning, it's the same. When you delegate chatting or even a virtual assistant, I advise against trying to have a manager for that area right away. Once again, what we did at first was hire one chatter, then two, then three. Then we had a chatter who was really good, so we asked him if he wanted to move up and he became a chatter manager. Now he manages several chatters, but we didn't start out by hiring a chatter and a chatter manager right away. Once again, we do things step by step, and it's really important to understand this and to truly apply it to the letter. Don't try to delegate too quickly. It's true that it sounds impressive to say you have, I don't know how many chatters and virtual assistants, but in reality, it's better to have a small staff who work really well and are properly supervised. So a small team that's really well trained is better than having too many people on the team who in the end aren't serious and don't deliver results. Really try to have a small team, but one of quality. The fifth mistake, and perhaps the worst one that can truly ruin all your revenue, is being afraid to ask the model for content. What you need to understand is that I coach too many students, and during the first call, I review their agency with them. And actually, they tell me, okay, I have 2 Latina models. Okay, that's already good. Here again, that can also be a mistake, except that most of the time, for example, I have one student as an example, he had 2 Latina models, but in reality, neither of them was working. So basically, he was struggling with content that wasn't even good quality. He was also spending money on mass DMs and all the paid methods he tried. And in fact, he had so little content that sometimes his reels were just a photo with some little effects and text added, and that just doesn't convert. You have to understand that this kind of content isn't viral at all. It just doesn't work anymore. And actually, if he gets any views, it's really just luck or because he spent a lot of money. But you really shouldn't be afraid to ask the model for content. Don't hesitate to really ask her for it. If she can't keep up, it means she's not cut out for this business, okay? It does take her some time, but when we say time, it's not like it takes her 8 hours a day, you know? On average, for our models, we might need them, let's say, 3 or 4 hours a week. So the hourly rate for her is really amazing if you compare it, for example, to minimum wage. But still, it does require a certain amount of time each week to create quite a lot of content, and we need all that content in order to have a strategy that works and develops well. If ever the model can't keep up with the pace, don't try to ask her for less just to avoid upsetting her. Try to make do with what you have, because otherwise you're just going to struggle. But really try to recruit a model who will be okay with creating all the content you're going to ask for. And then, at that point, you'll really be able to move forward, put the things you want in place and test everything you want. That's how you'll get results. But don't be afraid. Not all models are cut out for business. You have to accept that. Some aren't serious, some are really serious, and I actually recommend that you find models who are serious. Recently we contacted one, and actually from the very beginning we've had all the content we wanted on time. We ask her for a script and we almost have it the next day, and that's really great. And it's with this kind of model that you can really make money and where there's real potential. If the model doesn't work, if you have very little content, just tell yourself she has zero potential. Don't overcomplicate things. If she doesn't work, that's the end of it. We can't invent the content, we can't create it out of nothing. So you really need to understand that. Honestly, this video might be the most important one on my channel because these are really the mistakes that I'd say 99.99% of OnlyFans managers make. And actually, I've made these mistakes myself in the past. Today, I don't make those mistakes anymore, and that's what allows me to make a living from my agency and literally earn 5 figures a month. If you ever want me to train you to generate 300 euros a day with OFM in less than 90 days, you'll find my program directly available in the description, where I'll help you reach that goal. And if you enjoyed the video, don't hesitate to like it, leave a comment, but most importantly, subscribe. All right, see you, ciao.